Hello, welcome. Today we are going to talk about part three in our development unit. Part three is going to cover cognitive and moral development, so Piaget and Kohlberg's theories. Um, Keep in mind that Piaget, of all the people we're doing in our development unit, Piaget is the biggest and most important. There are always a couple questions on the AP test about Piaget. So let's get started. First of all, Piaget was studying cognitive development, and he believed our intellectual development happened when our genetic imprint mixed with experience, and then we had cognitive development. So our cognitive development is the way we think. Okay, so he had a series of stages he talked about, and the first stage was called the sensory motor stage. This is when babies, it's like 0 to 2, and babies are taking in the world by looking, hearing, touching. I don't know if you notice babies, they're always touching stuff, they're putting stuff in their mouth, they're feeling, they're just experiencing the world through their senses. When children are younger than 6, they don't have something called object permanence. Object permanence comes around when you're about 8 months old. Object permanence is when you know that if you can't see something, it still exists. So prior to getting that, peekaboo is real fun. You can hide something under a blanket. You can take a toy and put it behind the couch. And the babies don't go looking for it if they can't see it. Because if they can't see it, they don't know that it exists. Okay, and that changes around 8 months during the sensory motor stage. Okay, the next stage is called the pre-operational stage. This is from about 2 until 6 or 7. And Piaget thought during this stage children are too young to perform a lot of mental operations like math or being logical. For instance, the idea of conservation they do not have. Conservation is the idea that if you have like 2 glasses of liquid that are the same, and then you pour one of the glasses into a tall, skinny glass, and it looks like it's more, the kid will think it's more, even though they watched you pour it. They know it's the exact same amount of water. Because the shape changes, they don't understand that the volume is the same. So that's conservation. They don't have that in conservation. They start to get it towards the end of the pre-operational stage. Another thing going on in the pre-operational stage is egocentrism. This is the idea that they can't perceive something from another's point of view. So for instance, if you had a 2-year-old and they had a picture and they said, show mom the picture, they would show it, but it would still be facing them. So they wouldn't understand that you have to turn the picture around so that their mother could see it. Children in the pre-operational stage also develop a theory of mind. They don't start with it, but they do get it by the end of the pre-operational stage. This is the ability to understand that other people have their own beliefs and desires, intentions, and perspectives. In other words, that other people have their own minds. So prior to getting this, they just assume everybody's like them. So here's an example of how this would work out. If you look at this drawing at the top, there's Sally and Annie. Sally puts the ball in the red cupboard. Sally goes away. Annie moves the ball to the blue cupboard. Sally comes back. Where would she look for it? If you don't have a theory of mind yet, you would say that Sally looks for it in the blue cupboard, because you don't understand that Sally's perspective, she doesn't know where the ball is. Once you develop a theory of mind, you would know that Sally still doesn't know where the ball is, and she would look in the red cupboard. Okay, after the pre-operational is the concrete operational stage. This is 6 to 7 to about 12. People are grasping the conservation problems. They understand the water changes, volume changes. And they're also able to transform, do more complex math. So 4 plus 8 equals 12. They know that 12 minus 4 equals 8. So concrete, they can do concrete mental tasks. They're not getting into abstract thought yet. The formal operational stage, starting around age 12, is when you get into more operational thought. So this is like middle school kids. Your ability to reasoning becomes more abstract. You can use symbols. You can use imagine reality, systematically reason. So you start thinking about good and evil. You start critiquing society. You're thinking about God and what God is like. All that starts in the formal operational stage. You can also start to think more about, you become more self-conscious and wondering what other people are thinking about you. Okay, those are the stages. Here's a summary chart. If you missed something and you need to write down what's going on, you can pause it on this chart, write down the ages, and write down the ideas. I'm going to keep moving though. Okay. Another thing Piaget talked about is how do we learn things? How does our mind work? And how do we think? And he had this idea of a schema. And schema was a concept or framework that organized and interprets information. So a schema would just be like the word chair would be a schema. And chair could mean like a big, soft, comfortable chair. It could mean a chair that's in your kitchen. It could mean a chair that's a swivel chair, like an office chair. But it's a framework. All of those things are chairs because we have a schema for chair, which is like something you sit on that has a back and has a seat. So another example, or another couple things that happen with schemas. When kids are young and like 1, 2 years old, they're assimilating information into the schemas. They're learning schemas, like moms and dads are teaching them, this is a dog, this is a chair, this is a ball, this is a table. So they're getting all these schemas in their first couple of years of life. And one of the things that happens is they're assimilating new experiences into your current understanding. So if you have the schema of chair, and let's say the baby gets this and it's like their kitchen chair, their kitchen table, which is kind of a normal chair, and then the baby goes and learns that there's a swivel chair in the office that turns and rotates and it doesn't have 4 legs, but it's like on one post, but they learn that's also a chair. And then they go into their living room and they have a recliner and they learn that's also a chair. So when they're learning all these different types of chairs, they're assimilating new experiences into their current understanding. Now, if they have to adjust their schema, it's called accommodation. So let's take the schema of dog. The first time a little kid sees a dog, they call it, the parents say, oh, that's a dog. It's furry. It's got 4 legs. So the next time the kid sees a small animal, it's actually a cat, but it's furry and it's got 4 legs, they would call it a dog because they're assimilating the new information into their existing schema. But when they accommodate their schema, they're learning that no, it's a cat. Cats meow, cats are smaller, cats have whiskers. And so they have a new schema. The schema of dog is adjusted so that it does not include cats. So that's accommodation. So with cognitive development from 6 months old, year old, 18 months, 2 years old, there's constantly this process of assimilation and accommodation. Okay, so Piaget is a giant in the field of psychologists. He's like, of all the psychologists we learned this year, he's like top 2, 3 most important people. There was a Time magazine list of 100 most important people of the 20th century. He was one of those people. So he's a big deal. However, he did get criticized for a couple things. A lot of modern psychologists think that there's not these distinct stages that kids go through, but development is a little more continuous. And people also thought that Piaget's stages, the ages were a little bit too old. Like people start formal operations a little bit before 12. People start concrete operations a little bit before age 6 or 7. So those are the 2 criticisms of Piaget. Another idea with development, human development, was created by Lev Vygotsky. He talked about how students learn also, or how kids learn, and there's this assimilation accommodation. he talked about something called a zone of proximal development. And this was the space that kids are learning, the space between what they can do on their own and what they can do with a teacher. So a teacher or a parent can help them, but you have to be close enough to what they're already doing that you can help the student learn. You can't be too far out ahead of them. For instance, if there's a 6 or 7-year-old, you can't start teaching them calculus. You have to be teaching them basic arithmetic. So you can't get too far out ahead of the kids. You have to stay in the zone of proximal development. Okay, let's talk about morality. This guy named Kohlberg talked about morality a lot. He would give kids of all ages this moral dilemma where someone stole some food and they did it to feed their family or save their family, and they stole some medicine to save their family, and what should happen to that person who stole the food or medicine. And when he got responses from kids, he divided them up. He noticed there was kind of 3 categories. There's pre-conventional, which young kids are talking about the person should be punished or there should be a reward. Conventional morality, the way that people think in this age, this is adolescence, early adolescence, like elementary school, middle school. You have to follow the rules. The rules are the most important thing. The rules are what matters. And then there's post-conventional morality. People start to have their own ideas. Well, sometimes the rules are right, sometimes the rules are wrong. I think justice is this, and the law isn't always justice. So post-conventional is people more thinking things through, not always following the rules exactly. Okay, last thing here. Carol Gilligan was a student of Kohlberg's, and she noticed when Kohlberg did his research that all he researched was males, and so that his views were skewed. When she did the research with women, she noticed that women's morality was more about caring and responsibility, less about abstract justice. So that was the feminine voice and the masculine voice. She also critiqued psychology in general. This is back in the 80s. She noted that a lot of the research was done on men and that men were the normal response. And then when women were a little bit different than the men, that was deemed abnormal. So it's a good critique of psychology at the time, and psychology has changed to adjust how we view men and women. All right, that's the end today. If you see me in class, if you have any questions, see me in class.